Hey guys, this is John, and welcome to another standard video. I'm playing Sunrise the Light 2508 rating. All right, strong opponent here. Let's play a Sicilian. I've been playing a lot of Sicilian lately. I hope you guys don't mind. It produces some fascinating battles. I saw this player in the lobby sporting this rating. This is a rapid game rather than a classical game, but too tempting of an opponent to pass up. And we still got a little increment here, so let's see what we can do with it. Uh, I feel like playing. Hmm. Let's go with just thinking about what variations. Yeah, let's go with a Kan. I'll play a Kan Sicilian. So Kan and Classical are the two main Sicilians that I play. I also branch out occasionally, play like accelerated, hyper accelerated Dragon for instructional purposes. I used to play the Nightorf a little bit, but Kan and Classical Sicilian are my bread and butter. And we'll see what White does. I do think the Hedgehog formations at the highest level are some of the most theoretically challenging. So I'll be curious what White does, if they go c4 or if they develop more conventionally within this open Sicilian. Knight c3, bishop d3. I was just playing a 15-15 game a few minutes ago, and it was shaping up to be an interesting middle game, and then my opponent left the game, so I ended up claiming victory. So this is actually the second video I'm recording today. Okay, let's play queen c7. You can also go b5, kind of a trendy recommendation, the early b5. All right, a3. Let's play knight f6. So with the queen on c7, I'm being flexible. I put some pressure here, but mostly it's the flexibility that we're interested in. And okay, so early g3 by my opponent. Intriguing. Yeah, I've ran into this a couple times. I wonder if knight c6 is appropriate here. I don't normally play this way in the Kan. I tend to send the knight to d7. But I think in this case, it may be valid. I could also do this. It's kind of a slower plan. I have ran into some troubles there in the past, getting kind of rolled when White starts advancing on the king side. So knight c6 could be a good moment. It could be a good moment to play this move. Then again, there's this bishop f4 idea, right? Okay, I'm getting deja vu because I think I've had this in a recent game. Okay, but I can play knight e5. Is that how my game went? All right, let's play it. I don't want to get too far behind here. With the 5-second increment instead of 15, it could be a little more frenzied if we get below, let's say, 5 minutes. All right, so bishop g2. Yeah, okay, so this is coming back to me. So I had a recent game where I played h5, h4 in a position of this type. I don't think this is one I recorded for YouTube. I think I played it on Twitch. It might have been the exact same line. So I could try this idea. I could also try taking in bishop c5. That's quite a consistent option here. I wonder if then White will play this bishop f4 idea. Yeah, there's shades of the Taimanov. It's possible we transpose to a variation of the Taimanov, now that I think about it. Let's play h5. I'm kind of curious how White's going to respond to this. So some early aggression. Let's see what White thinks about the possibility of this pawn coming to h4. And I'm pretty sure this is what I did in the other game. Kept the tension between the knights for the time being and played h5. Okay, so White castles. So h4 would be consistent here. Just looking out for bishop f4. I want to make sure that e5 is still a good reply. I think it is. I still think that looks pretty good. Yeah, so let's go for h4. Oh, shout out to Neverness in the chat or in the spectator list. I always see you there. And greetings to everyone for watching, who's watching this right now, whether it's live or in the future when I post this on YouTube. So outwardly a risky strategy, but this is becoming more of an accepted idea. You actually saw this in my last climbing the rating ladder video. If you watch that, it was a game I played on the black side of the King's Indian, where my opponent tried to do this to me when they had the white pieces. So they went h4, h5, attacked my King's Indian setup in this way. So now I'm doing it against my opponent's fianchettoed bishop. But the fact that the center is relatively closed right now makes this possible. I wouldn't be contemplating this if I thought like the E or the D files would blow up anytime soon. Okay, so bishop e3. Yeah, pretty calm reaction by white. I think if I take, they're probably going to take with the h file, with the h pawn, in which case the h file is open. But it's not easy for me to take advantage of that h file. It's important to note. So that's not that big of a deal. That being said, I may take and play knight e5. I think that does look fairly tempting. I wonder if there's anything to worry about with like knight b5, take. Probably not. I think I can even watch the b6 square if I need to. So I'm currently thinking take and play knight e5, hinting at knight g4 ideas. And that knight on e5 is pretty handy. I think it's on a good square. I could also delay this capture, try to derive some benefit, maybe from like throwing an h3 somewhere. That could be an option. Like if I were to play knight e5 directly. But then, let's say bishop f4 take. Maybe they want to take with the bishop. So I think I will go for this. I didn't think much about f-pawn takes. Maybe I should. I'm not that scared of that move. So I would welcome white playing that because they isolate their e-pawn. They kind of open their king here. Unlike that King's Indian game where I did end up taking with the f-pawn when my opponent played h4, h5, and took on g6. White's not gaining any tempo by attacking anything. So I think it's a bit of a different circumstance here. And I would expect h-pawn takes. Okay, not doing too bad time-wise. We're getting into the middle game here. Maybe late opening, early middle game, or rising. Takes with the h-pawn. So a move like bishop c5, kind of tempting, but the bishop's undefended there. You can get hit with knight b5 if you do that. I don't know about taking. I don't think that's necessarily the strongest, especially when white can take with the queen, which stops bishop c5 altogether. Could play something like d6, but I'm really looking at this knight e5 move. I think that's the way to go. Let's play it. So things that white has to be concerned about now, knight c4, knight g4. This may enable bishop c5 in the future with my queen coordinating with the bishop. So lots of options to be had from here. White's bishop on g2 is a little buried. It's staring at this pawn. Any f4 move is going to entail a further weakening of the white king. You might be wondering what I'm going to do with my king. It's up in the air right now. I'm probably going to be riding with the king in the center for the time being. Maybe an outside chance I castle queenside, although I would doubt it with the bishops pointing here. I think most likely this king's going to be sticking around in the middle. And I could have disconnected rooks for a while. The game's already kind of quirky, basically. But this feels like the right way to play based on my Sicilian experience. This feels like the way to go. And I'm trying to predict how white's going to create counterplay here. And I'm having a bit of a hard time. I mean, I don't think white has to panic by any means. But let me put it this way. It looks harder to play white's position than my position right now. Unless I'm missing some important idea that white has. And I think the faster the time control, the more a statement like that matters, regardless of what the computer thinks. Like, which side has it easier to play when time is ticking low? So I'm feeling pretty good going into this middle game. And even though I spent multiple moves sending the h-pawn down the board and then taking, I do think this potential weakening of the white king, even if I'm not going to deliver mate on h2 anytime soon, that could matter in the future. It's something white always has to consider. My rook can help create threats in the future, maybe. Like there are some situations where maybe I land a rook h2 move after the knight comes to g4. That's a ways away for sure. But it contributes to the general uncomfortable feeling of the white king, even if there's nothing imminent. Okay, so bishop f4, I think that's pretty logical. It pins me here. I'm thinking maybe I want to play bishop c5 now. Might be a good time to do this. And maybe then play d6. I could also consider playing d6 right away and just keeping that knight on e5, maybe bishop d7, maybe castle. Then it's kind of a case of what is my dark square bishop doing. Another option is knight h5, hitting the bishop. Seems a little early to do that, though. Not sure I'm the biggest fan of that move. So tentatively, I'm thinking bishop c5. If knight a4, maybe bishop a7. Tuck the bishop. Have some long-range pressure here. I wonder if I have to consider white playing knight f3, though. Maybe white's going to go knight f3 in the near future. Trying to undermine. I mean, I could, at that point, play the e5, the d6 move to defend e5. But it's something I should have on my radar. Yeah, I'm going to go bishop c5. White seems a little hesitant here. I feel like there were more challenging ways for them to meet this whole h5, h4 idea. So let's play an aggressive move that I don't currently see anything wrong with either. Now, if white plays, let's say, rook e1, then I have to take more heed about what could occur down the e-file. So there's a potential alignment here. Wow, b4, aggressive move. Very aggressive. I wonder if the idea is if bishop a7 to perhaps go knight b5 at this point. Fork the queen and the bishop. Take bishop a7, knight b5, take on b5. Doesn't seem quite sound, but well, maybe, because queen b8, knight d6 actually wins the knight on e5. Okay, so maybe in deference to this move, I may play bishop e7 now, which covers the d6 square. Taking doesn't look too hot. I don't have knight f3 or anything. I can take here. Taking on d4 and then playing d6 doesn't look like it quite lives up to the demands of the position. So I think bishop e7 and attack this knight on c3, because I would like to shore up the dark squares around my king a little bit. Yeah, I do think otherwise I got to worry about the knight b5 move more than I would prefer. And if I go here, knight b5 with one of the knights, it's not going to work, right? Because I have queen c6 or queen b6 at the end. I think that's the case. Not going to take also because that loses material. So let's play bishop e7. So hitting this, debatable if that's actually a threat, though, because white can take here. So I think now I will settle into the d6 thing. I guess I'm going to claim that b4 was a weakening move. I've induced a weakening move, and white's knight on c3 is a concern going forward. And maybe broadly the c4 and c3 squares, since the b3 pawn, or the b pawn for white can never cover those squares. Broadly, those might be weaker too. Just when I thought white was being a little hesitant and unsure how to meet my h-pawn advance and the early bishop c5, knight e5 stuff, white pretty quickly played that b4 move. So just interesting. Sometimes our perception of what's going on is not in line with the reality of the situation. Okay, still doing fine on the clock. I'm trying to predict what white will do here. Again, I'm having a bit of a hard time. The position's already a little unusual. I don't even know if white will defend that knight on c3. Again, because bishop takes e5 is always the answer if I take. I don't think anything direct is going to work for white. I guess it's possible they might play knight d5 pawn takes d5, knight f5. That is an idea in the Sicilian. I highly doubt that works here because of d6, attacking the knight. Okay, white plays that. Knight f3. Yeah, so this did cross my mind. I can take queen takes and then play e5 if I want. Although that weakens the d5 square. I think that's kind of what white is angling for. Or I can play d6. That would be my default reaction here. Just d6, super solid move. Helps facilitate my light square bishop coming into the game. Maybe a rook coming over. Maybe castling queenside, but again, probably not. Another move here is knight g4, knight f to g4. I'm leaning towards d6, though. d6 seems correct to me. Knight g4, decent, though, too, I think. Looks a little shaky, though. I think I'd prefer d6, so let's play that. Makes more sense to me. And I know from experience, these knights on e5 in the Sicilian, blockading the enemy e-pawn, are pretty handy. So I'm happy with this construction. White doesn't have much in the way of pawn play themselves. So with my pawns on e6, d6, controlling these important squares, I'm feeling pretty secure. I don't feel like I'm in danger of white playing some sort of breakthrough move or causing tactical trouble in the short term. d6 is also backed up a couple times. That was the benefit of bringing the bishop back to e7, as we have that bishop and the queen guarding. If my bishop were on a7, this would be more of a tender point. I might have to watch something like queen d2, rook d1, but the bishop on e7 does a great job of shoring this up. Yeah, starting to like my position more and more. I think queen d2 is pretty likely here. If queen d4 to develop and defend the knight and put pressure here, I think that's a blunder because of knight takes f3, bishop takes f3, e5 with the fork. So a little pattern there. If the knight leaves the e5 square, we get the pawn up for the fork. All right, and my opponent's spending some time. Got a bit of a surplus here. I'd like to keep it that way. It's so much fun making these videos when everything goes down in real time. You know, I do no editing on these videos, and I think it's useful for you guys to see the whole picture, you know, regardless of the result. Okay, takes on e5. Yeah, I don't think there's any reason I would take here, so we're going to take. White's going to play bishop d2 from the looks of it. Yeah, my move's forced, so let's not waste time. Bishop d2. Okay, so we got white to retreat. The structure is starting to crystallize a little bit. I have the doubled pawns, but they're so handy. They control so much territory. Thinking about maybe b5 or b6. b6 would be a bit of an unusual decision here, but it makes some sense. Also, bishop d7. Maybe I will end up castling queenside after all, because the center's getting a little more blocked. b5 I'm not sure about, though, because the a4, I don't like giving white that hook to use. I know b4 is loose, but tactically speaking, I have some issues. So I'm thinking here either bishop d7 or b6 if I really want the bishop here. It's kind of a close call. Maybe leaning bishop d7. I can always put the bishop on c6 later if I want. Yeah, let's play bishop d7. Try to keep that time edge. It's a good coordinating move. Queen e2, logical. Probably rook c8 here. Rook c8, maybe I'll go for queen c4. Do you think a queen trade could make sense in these positions? These middle games / end games tend to go pretty well for black with this structure. And I'm vaguely considering castling queenside and trying to attack. I just don't think an attack on the king side is going to be that compelling because I don't have much pawn action going there. So let's play rook c8. Tentative idea is use the square. Queen c4. Also, we'll make white think twice about the future of the c2 pawn if this knight is pinned for the foreseeable future. If white were to move the knight now, I don't know that I would take c2 per se, but white has to think about it at least. Okay, rook d1 makes sense. I think on queen c4, white's probably going to try to avoid a queen exchange. That is my prediction. So like queen e1, let's say. But then I may get some activity with knight g4 if I want. I could also go queen e3. I'm not particularly concerned about that, though, I don't think. Yeah, let's play this. Yeah, maybe they'll trade, but I kind of think white wants to keep queens on board because this endgame doesn't look too hot for them. Or queenless middle game is maybe a more accurate descriptor. There's a lot of play. I think people automatically think endgame, fewer pieces, more static and limited play, but just because the queens come off the board doesn't mean you're in like a situation like that. There can be a lot of play in queenless middle games. Yeah, I'm going to predict queen e1. It's a passive looking move, but white can try to kick my queen away at some point with bishop f1. Okay, queen f3. Yeah, somehow I didn't think white would go there, but makes some sense. Okay, so how do I make progress here? If my rook and my queen were switched around, the pressure on c3 would be more palpable. Bishop c6 looks natural, but then bishop f1 is kind of concerning because my queen doesn't have squares. But I do have bishop takes e4 there, in fairness. Okay. I don't know what white is going to do next. I mean, maybe it will be bishop f1. I could try to maneuver this knight. It's currently not doing much, so like maybe I could go here and here. Would make some sense. Wonder if white would go queen h5 against that. Knight h7, queen h5. Be really nice if my bishop could get here, but that's not happening anytime soon. So these are the moves I'm looking at. Knight h7, queen h5. Maybe I start moving my king over. But queen h5 hits this pawn too. Not even clear white's threatening to take it. Sometimes you can try to castle by hand in these situations. Don't think that's too convincing, though. Rook h5, not really going anywhere. Rook h5 idea, g5. Looks a little abstract. Okay, I'm behind on the clock now, so let's try to pick up the pace. I mean, bishop c6 is playable. Bishop c6. But then bishop g5 is enabled. Could pull the queen back. Could go queen c7. Feels like a bit of a concession. Okay, I think I am actually going to go knight h7. Let's play this move. Because I see here, I can play bishop f6 and then maybe g6. It's a bit of an odd move to make, but I feel like I needed to find some coordinating plan there. Bishop f1 played. Okay, queen c7 probably. Let's do it. This defends this pawn now. So I think I really wanted to back my queen off. But now, at least I have this knight g5 move on the way. Okay, and they do play this. So, yeah, this does pin here, but I saw that I had this and this plan to allow the rook to be defended. So I'm probably going to play g6. Just on the lookout for any tactical threats I'm missing. I don't see them. Let's go. Because if white wedges the queen in here, suddenly bishop f6 and knight g5 is a big threat. They'd probably have to retreat all the way to e3 maybe. If I could ever trade dark square bishops in a way that made sense, then again, the knight becomes loose. We'll see where white puts that queen, though. That will determine a lot. Maybe queen will come to g4. I could see that happening, trying to induce me to play knight f6 again. Maybe white will go queen h3 first, and then when I play bishop f6, then they'll play queen g4. That would get kind of sophisticated. I could see myself walking the king over to g7 to just eventually... Whoa, queen h... Okay, that move was not on my radar at all. Wow. Is white taking the scenic route over here? That is pretty fascinating. Okay, bishop f6 is still the main move I'm thinking about. But this might make sense too, actually. Strangely enough. Kind of slow, though. Bishop f6, queen f3. Let's say king e7. Okay, let's do it. Let's see what white has in mind. I think the queen's going to come here. Yep. And now do I just tuck this in? King e7? Could be all right. What a wacky sequence. Gotta watch the c5 square a little bit, but how does white realistically take advantage of that? Not seeing it. Okay, let's go king e7. So this may happen. Again, there is this queen coming to g4, but we'll see. I'm still a little behind on the clock, so I'm trying to be as mindful as possible about that. Yeah, I think queen g4 is what I would do here as white. It's not like it threatens anything, but it just makes me think twice about coming to the g5 square, which I still might be able to do, but there's some weakness on d7 in the end. So I probably need this bishop defended in the case that something opens up, especially if my queen ever comes down here. That's my best paraphrasing at the moment. As best I can do with 2 minutes and 44 seconds on my clock. I might play on queen g4. I might play this just to coordinate further. Usually when time is getting low and you're unsure what to do, you should prefer coordinating moves. Keep your position nice and connected, redundantly protected sometimes, so adding in an extra defender or two can be handy. Just in case tactics occur and the position explodes and you're not missing a defense that you would otherwise like to have. Knight d5. Wow. All right, obviously I got to take this. Okay, I was not expecting that at all. Again, I don't think this is a good idea. I hate to make like snap judgments about an opponent's idea, but I seriously doubt this is good. The only thing that matters here with 2.5 minutes is playing accurately. King f8 maybe. Yeah, let's go king f8. We're going to duck and cover here for a second. Not going to go e4 because take. That comes with check. I just want to tuck my king in. I would expect white to try to throw these pawns up the board. That's kind of how I'm thinking white's going to react to having given a piece. That looked very panicky, though. Don't think that move is necessary at all. But maybe they're playing off the low time. There we go, c4. Okay, so I could win an exchange. Thing is, I don't know if I want to weaken the dark squares like that. Might be better to sit tight here. How big a deal is c5 coming up? I think I can fade that. I'm not particularly worried about c5. I'd rather get in like knight g5. So yeah, let's just coordinate. We're not going for the exchange. That's a small amount of material that I would win with that. I'm already up a piece for a pawn, so I don't need to win more material. I want to fully secure my position, cut down on their counterplay. Because if I did that other line, I think I would have big trouble on the dark squares, and I'd have to, even if the position's good for me, I'd have to defend for a while accurately. Okay, rook c1. So maybe now I do this. Might be time for knight g5. It's just a attractive coordinating move. Queen takes f6 doesn't work. So let's do it. Now I got my pieces working together pretty nicely. Maybe I can play e4 and knight f3. I think white's light square bishop is going to be important for their defense. They may have to part with their dark square bishop, which would be most welcome for me. If that happens, the main thing I have to do is just make sure white doesn't get too much counterplay with the c and d pawns. But if ever white pushes d6, it's possible my bishop will land on c6 and there could be mating ideas on h1. Remember, I was mentioning that rook from way back when. Okay, rook c3. Okay, f5. Maybe transferring the queen somewhere could be good here. Bishop a4 is another idea. Is f5 too much? I don't think so. I think f5 actually makes quite a bit of sense here. It does block my light square bishop a little bit this way. But no, I like the look of it. Let's go f5. Here, bishop can always come back here to f6 to cover this diagonal. Okay, white's under a minute. Remember, we got that 5-second increment. So adding 5 seconds every move. This helps ensure a more quality chess result versus a mouse moving battle. Okay, bishop g2, white's shoring things up. I think e4. Let's do it. Advance. Okay, probably queen e5 or bishop coming back to f6. Put the bishop back for now. Now, if here I have bishop a4. Yeah, so white dodges that. And again, I just got to take care of these pawns. I don't want those pawns getting too far advanced. Now the game's shifting to the center / queen side a little more. Let's play queen e5. Right. Again, we're going to prefer coordinating moves when time is low. Pieces protecting other pieces. Okay, here maybe? Or bishop a4 first is interesting. Trying to induce rook d2, but bishop g5, there's f4. Okay. Yeah, let's just play this. 39 seconds. Maybe queen e3 could be played. I don't have this yet. Yeah, white does that. Okay. May stick the bishop on d3. I think I kind of just like this here. I'm going to do it. Break this. Threatening queen takes d5, so I'd expect d6. Maybe queen here at some point soon. But also think about this and this. But again, I don't know that I'm ever really threatening bishop g5 yet. Goes bishop f1. Okay, so they want to deal with that right away. But I can take here now, I think. I think that's a blunder by white. Let's do it. Because when there's a trade here, I'm threatening that old mate on h1. Remember. Pretty important. Okay, a few seconds left for white. Take. Threaten the mate. And if f3, bishop d4, so this might be lights out. Yep, there we go. Get the pin and win. All right, take with check. Let's get this rook in the game at long last. Might as well, right? And my opponent resigns. Okay, so thanks for the game. Yeah, so the time definitely influenced events later on. I do think this was a critical stage of the game when I played knight h7. I don't think white reacted so well to this. Bishop f1 might be okay, but queen h5, queen h1 was too extravagant, I believe. Maybe white missed this whole bishop f6 plan. It was a kind of a strange triangulation of the queen back to the f3 square. Basically, white would have to argue that my pieces are misplaced in order for this to be good, which is perhaps kind of true. But honestly, if I were to single out one move in this game, it's got to be knight d5, because that move, although it's a common theme in the Sicilian to sacrifice a knight on d5, I don't think white has enough firepower here, enough counterplay coming. Too few pieces that can participate in the attack further. There needs to be more heat coming against my king, maybe some pawn tension, another knight coming into the picture somewhere, bishops that aren't so passively placed. I didn't really see that here. Yeah, thanks a lot to my opponent, Sunrise the Light, for the game. I'm pretty happy with this one. I don't regret too many decisions here. I'll be curious about this opening. Again, I'm pretty sure I played this exact line recently. I'm at that stage in my chess career where I played so many games, it's hard to keep track of them sometimes, even though I can remember pretty well certain games, variations, events, like when I'm in a similar situation. I couldn't tell you like what day of the week I played the game in question. But I guess all told, I'm not complaining about my chess memory. I'm trying to think of other things I'm going to be curious about the engine giving its evaluation on. Like b4, I don't think b4 is a good idea for white. This position's probably fine, but I felt like it was easier for me to play. I mentioned that in the game. There's just something about it. Maybe the solid knight on e5, maybe this kind of buried bishop, the slight pressure around white's king, even though this takes a while to develop. There's something about this that I would feel uncomfortable about from white's perspective. And I don't know what I would do here as white, but I don't think b4 was the way. I mean, maybe white should just play something like queen d2 here and try to bring a rook to d1, a little more patient. Okay, but let's take a look. We got some chat going on here. What's up, Neverness? Rook he8. Oh, it didn't like that at the end. Oh, I had mate in 7, and I played rook he8. Queen d2 is better. Okay. I saw a queen d2. I thought white would connect the rooks, but I guess queen h2 is coming in too. Among other things, like rook h2 is probably ending the game immediately there. At that point, I was breathing a sigh of relief, and I was just happy to be in a position up a queen. Okay, so we had this Kan. Yep, e6, a6. And I mentioned at the very highest levels, c4 is the way that a lot of the top players like to play, going for the Maroczy bind. And black has to know how to counterattack against this, particularly in the middle game, because black often has to play with less space. We won't get into that for now. I do have a video on that, the hedgehog formation, if you're curious. Black doesn't even have to play a pure hedgehog. I actually saw a game today that Grandmaster Artur's Nexans beat Alexei Shirov in on the black side of this with a very interesting setup that I think he advocates. But anyways, in this game, we had knight c3. Yeah, and a3, g3, I don't know about this order of moves. Like, I have seen this before. A3 puts a stop to bishop b4. It's not conventionally the main line by any means. Usually white plays bishop d3. Yeah, sometimes you see bishop e2. There's also a ton of theory with white playing bishop d3 before committing this knight. They can keep c4 in reserve if they want. So there are various branches here. One thing I like about the Kan is that it's flexible, and also that white tends to be out of book faster than they are against other Sicilians. You know, if you play the Nightorf against someone and they play open Sicilian, like they're probably booked up on how to play against the Nightorf. A lot of people are not booked up on how to play against the Kan, which is characterized by e6, a6, and queen c7, specifically in the open Sicilian, guys. I know it's easy to get lost in the myriad lines of the Sicilian, but when people talk about lines like Kan, Nightorf, Sveshnikov, Dragon, they're referring to white playing knight f3, followed by d4, and an exchange occurring here, and the setup that black has against that. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. If white plays c3 on move 2, the Alpin Sicilian, or bishop c4, the Bodler, as we know, is very popular against the Sicilian at lower levels, or knight c3, these can lead to different types of systems. You're not just going to parrot the same moves most of the time that you would in like one of those Dragon, Nightorf, whatever setups. But I digress. So a3, it does stop bishop b4, but yeah, I guess in the Masters database, there's just not very many games with this exact order of moves. A3 is sometimes played with f4 and bishop e2, but it looks like g3, there's one game, and black did play knight c6. Yeah, it just seemed like a good time to play this. Okay, now we're transposing. I did mention maybe the Taimanov variation is something we'll transpose into. Taimanov is if black plays, instead of a6, knight c6 with queen c7 on the way, sometimes with a6 later. That's a different but related line. In the Kan, usually the knight goes to d7, sometimes to c6, but typically to d7. But I felt like this was a good time to challenge this knight. So I went for that. Bishop g2. Yeah, and h5 played in one master game from this position. Oh, couple actually. And I think we're transposing, and two out of two score there for black. All right. Yeah, I think the various selections that black has here kind of shows you the flexibility of this. h5 is one of them, but there's plenty of other okay moves here too. Bishop c5, bishop e7, d6. I didn't want to take yet, because if I do this, there are instances where white can play bishop f4 and counterattack your queen. I mean, this is probably acceptable as well, but this I think is a little more like mainstream. There are lines like this in the Taimanov, I know, where if black goes e5, white plays bishop g5, tries to take the knight on f6 and then use the d5 square. I was kind of hesitant to do any sort of structure where white had quick pressure on d6, and I might have to play e5 anytime soon. Engine says that's okay, though. So h5, idea to create some little pressure over towards the kingside. Now, I think the game that I was mentioning that I played recently on stream, my opponent played h4. I wonder, let's take a quick look in the Lichess database. Yeah, I won't try to hunt for that game too closely. I could look in my player database if I was really curious. But we do see games in the Lichess database from here. But, okay, white castled instead. Seems like a logical reaction. Are we out of the Masters database yet? Yes, we are. Okay. So white castles. I do go ahead and play h4. And I can get away with this flank attack because my king is pretty secure in the middle of the board. There's no rook on e1 opposing me yet. White menacing knight d5 or something. If that occurs, I would have to take a little more heed. You know, rook e1. Yeah, maybe I play d6. So if something like this happens, I can take, and maybe play knight e5. White could play f4 here, but even if I gave back the piece, it'd be fine because white's king is open, and my king actually looks okay here. Probably safer than white's king. So I can do this because the center is pretty stable. It's not like you can just push flank pawns randomly, even in 2023 with the AIs approving of those pushes in many positions. it still does violate traditional principles when you're pushing flank pawns early and neglecting your development. So you got to know what you're doing if you're going to do something like this. So bishop e3. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. White's developed kind of routinely, but I don't really like White's position. The engine dings White on bishop e3 a little bit. It doesn't like that move so much. It is suggesting rook e1. Oh, I should mention, if ever knight takes c6 is played, I probably would take with the d pawn and then go e5 and try to get the light square bishop out to e6 or g4. So that was my plan. You often take with the d pawn and get that light square bishop in the game. If you take with the b pawn, that can make sense in some cases if you want to go d5. That would probably jive more with a plan where I had castled kingside and not push the h-pawn at all. But in this circumstance, I'm okay with keeping the center closed and trying to complete my development. Because this bishop, due to all the whites, the pawns I have on light squares, this light square bishop for me can be kind of buried for a while. Okay, so bishop e3. Yeah, and maybe one reason I'm not so thrilled about this is because of the knight coming to e5. Like I did mention at this point in the game, this is where I was saying I thought my position was easier to play. Wasn't sure if it was better, but it felt easier to play. And I think the evaluation does reflect that. I mean, this is not terrible for white, but it's a comfortable slight edge for black. Just moves like this and this coming in. So white played bishop f4, pinning me. I went bishop c5, and interestingly, the engine says that's dubious. I mean, we're talking differences of like a half pawn here, but that's appreciable. Just wants me to play d6, maybe playing a la the game. Yeah, because I was skeptical of b4, but maybe the engine has a different take here. So b4, bishop e7. Okay, so if I go here, yeah, white can move a knight to b5. Let's say this knight here. Knight d to b5, a takes b5, knight takes b5. That is one thing you have to watch out for constantly in Sicilians, is knight sacrifices on b5 as well as d5. And here, I have trouble keeping all this together. I can't defend the knight on e5, actually. So like queen c6, take on a7, take, bishop takes e5. White's up material with two pretty strong bishops, especially the dark square bishop. So it's good that I play bishop e7 here, covering this square. Now this won't work, right? Because take. I think I can play a few different queen moves. Yeah, queen b8, queen c8. All these are okay. I should mention in the other line, so bishop a7, if I play queen b8 here, that covers this, but it runs into knight d6 check. I think I might have mentioned this line in the game. And if I move my king, then bishop takes e5 is possible. And the knight is guarded by the queen too, so I can't take. Okay, so bishop e7, and the engine simply wants white to play bishop takes e5 here. Part with the dark square bishop. Yeah, psychologically, that's a tough decision because, you'd probably want to keep the bishop pair. It vaguely feels like white could be weak on the dark squares because of some of their decisions. On this diagonal and this diagonal. I mean, queen takes e5 might allow for queen h5 later. Yeah, I would be happy with this. But the engine says this might be white's best option at this point. Interesting. Okay, so instead, knight f3. Yeah, and d6. And I've learned from playing the Kan that this pawn structure you get after knight takes e5, d takes e5 tends to be fine for black if the rest of the position is stable. In fact, it can be very helpful. Doubled pawns are not automatically bad guys. You got to get that out of your head that doubled pawns are just automatically a liability. It's definitely not the case. Doubled pawns yield open files. I think I have a YouTube video or two with that exact title. Doubled pawns yield open files. And doubled pawns on these stacked squares right on top of each other control so much territory on these adjacent files. Opens my dark square bishop a little bit too. So this is by no means a bad development for me. I'm very happy with this. And again, remember, knight f3 is playable because if queen takes c3, white can take on e5. So white was not just blundering a knight there. They have counterattacking ideas in mind. Also, if I take here, white's going to take with their queen and defend the knight in the process and hit my queen. So I like d6. White does take now, which is understandable. It's hard to play around that knight. And at this point, I am threatening here. So they take. Bishop d2 is forced because white has 2 pieces under attack. I was debating here. I did start spending some time on the next like few moves. I was debating moving my b pawn to one of these squares and putting the bishop on b7. Looks like b6 is one of the top moves. I'm glad I noticed that b5 is going to run into a4, I would assume, because b5 in principle is an attractive move, grabbing some space and preparing for bishop b7. But you got to watch this a4 move, undermining. I'm caught a little flat-footed here. The computer gives castles, actually. Can't say that was on my radar at all. I do think b6 looks pretty reasonable. It just ensures that white can't clash with my pawns, and then I can get this here. I thought these pawns might be a little soft in some cases in the middle game. I don't hate bishop d7 as well. I mean, we're talking about a tenth of a pawn difference in the evaluation, so I'm sure this is fine. And that eval might even change depending upon what engine we're using and how much time we give it to think. So I'm cool with this. Okay, queen e2, rook d8, or rook c8 rather. Actually wants me to play rook d8. Yeah, I'm noticing in a couple variations, I like to have 5 variations selected when I'm analyzing. It is recommending I castle or play king f8. So the engine is kind of hinting that I should maybe think about castling, maybe even directly here. And just admitting that my h-file pressure is not too scary. And the game is going to shift to this part of the board, most likely. That's interesting. Yeah, that looks like a legit option. I mean, I think that's less exciting, but I can see why that's fine. Rook d8's a little mysterious. I don't know about rook d8. I guess put some pressure down here. Let the queen have the c-file, but not try to stack, because maybe it's saying that even though I line up the queen and the rook, if the knight sits here, these pieces don't have a whole ton to do. But I'm not going to nitpick my play because it felt pretty natural. The eval's still good. Yeah, queen c4 kind of docks me for that a little bit. Again, it says castles. King f8, rook d8. Okay. So what does it want white to do? It wants white to take here and then play bishop f1, back off the rook. Okay, let's say rook c7, bishop d3. Yeah, I'm going to kind of overrule the computer from a human standpoint. The trend of the game and the feeling that I think my opponent and I had about this position doesn't necessarily indicate that black should be thinking about castling and playing a more standard Sicilian middle game. It kind of felt like I had pressure here with my king riding in the center and even into the queenless middle game / end game. It feels like I have some pressure here. I mean, maybe the engine disagrees, but I mean, even if I castled at this late stage, like after the queens come off the board, I still think rook coming over here. This pawn's backward. Some of the moves it's suggesting rook db1. I mean, that's a strange move if I do this. Yeah, I mean, this is not exactly a human way of playing, just defending the knight. I'd probably start maneuvering my knight at some point. Just on sight, like I would take black here for sure. So that's one of those dubious marks that I'm okay with accepting. Like I will acknowledge the computer has some better ways to strengthen white's defenses, but I'm not going to lose sleep over queen c4 versus castles. I kind of liked my rook here. I felt like it led to some opportunities in the long run, as happened in the game. All right, so white declines the queen trade. Wow, g5 is playable here. Yeah, didn't consider that move at all. That's a cool move. Okay, that's an engine suggestion I pay attention to, because the point there is to try to go g4 in some cases. And if white plays bishop takes g5, then I take on c3. And if bishop takes f6, I can insert queen takes f3, removing the defense here. That's a nice little sequence. If you saw g5 in that position, give yourself a pat on the back. I didn't, so I shouldn't pat my back, but that's a nice one. A little tactically justified sequence, trying to get g4 in. I'm not sure g4 is like earth-shattering or anything, but it's a cool idea. Puts pressure on the queen. Okay, so I played this knight h7 move, looking for knight g5. We got almost a dead even evaluation here. Rook ab1, bishop f1. That is what white played. Okay. I backed the queen off. And now queen h5. So yeah, I was kind of skeptical of this, and especially the next move, queen h1. Because it just seemed like this g6, bishop f6 idea was happening. Okay, interesting option. It suggests b5 here for white. I would instantly think of playing a5, but then it wants to go knight a4. Knight a4, and I have some troubles. Very interesting. So if I take this pawn, what happens to me? Knight back to c3? Oh, knight b6. So the knight can start working in. Interesting. So that, I guess, frees up this pawn to advance maybe. Maybe b6 in some cases. Okay, I could see that. Yeah, b5. I don't think I really spent much effort at all looking at that. I don't even know if I looked at that move, period. Yeah. Like the A and the B files were kind of ignored for the rest of the game. I did play a bishop b5 move later, but okay. So some counterplay available for white. Yeah, I probably would have just stuck with my plan, knight g5 against this move. Hit the queen, and then it wants to flee here. And the engine's pretty unconcerned. Just says the game's about equal. Doesn't matter that I have knight h3 at any point. Or taking. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I buy that. So queen h5, trying to prevent the knight from coming to g5. Now g6. And then this really surprised me, queen h1. I don't know what surprised me more, queen h1 or knight d5. Probably knight d5 coming up. Yeah. So it doesn't like this. It says queen e2, queen g4. I thought maybe queen g4 made the most sense. Trying to cover this square. Funnily enough, I could still play this, though, apparently. And what happens? So if take here... Oh, f5. Okay. Trying to shove the queen away from guarding the bishop. Wow. Not even taking on c3. Although that's playable too. f5. We want to scoop the bishop. We don't even want to just trade. We want to take the dark square bishop. Wow. Huh. So queen here. And now bishop f6. It actually says king f8 might be better. I think I mentioned king f8. Yeah, maybe just trying to come to g8, basically. So bishop f6, queen f3. Since now knight g5 is on the way, my rook is defended. King e7. Okay, so that gets the dubious mark too. So this is one of the better positions white has had, according to the engine. And the way to play it is b5. b5. Okay, so say I go knight g5. Is this going to be refuted somehow? Now knight d5. Wow. This is massively complicated. I think I see why. Bishop b4. How hard is that to visualize from a couple moves back? Thank you, Analysis Gang, by the way, for watching this. If you happen to still be watching at this point and you're interested in what I'm trying to uncover here, the subtleties of this position, maybe drop a comment because I'd be curious to hear from you guys. That is why it doesn't like this plan of king e7 and knight g5 because of b5 here and now knight d5 to make way for the bishop to come to b4, disconnecting my king and dark square bishop. That is super subtle. Yeah, from a couple moves back, this idea is almost inconceivable. It is interesting, though, that knight d5 features in one of these lines. It's just played a few moves later after a natural sequence. I don't have to go knight g5. I could play bishop g5, apparently. Yeah, that might make more sense, because now knight d5 is not going to work. Take, bishop check. I can just move my king. I'm not hanging a piece here. Wow. So this b5 move, I think, underestimated by both of us in this game. My opponent and myself. But even without b5, I don't think white should panic by any means in this position. There's other moves. I mean, it's a little tough to say, though. If I had white, what would I play here? The position still looks awkward to my eyes for white. And time was getting low. I mean, I probably would look for something to do on the queen side. I just don't know what. I wish I could answer this question without knowing that b5 is the preferred move. Yeah, I mean, I was instantly skeptical at knight d5, but I understand, like, this position just doesn't look too harmonious for white, to me. Huh, okay. So, knight d5, take, and now I'm just trying to consolidate for the rest of the game. King f8, top move. All right, yeah, I just thought, let's take care of my king. c4, and I passed up this option to go here. I know this is tempting to try to win further material, but that actually drops the evaluation because I would have trouble on the dark squares. I'm not interested in winning one more point of material. Win a rook for a minor piece and a pawn. I'm already ahead enough. I don't need more headaches on the dark squares. So I played king g7, just coordinating. I thought white should go c5 here, start advancing those pawns, because if white doesn't get those pawns up there soon and start causing me problems, I think what occurred in the game is going to occur, where I just gradually take over and white doesn't have anything to show for the piece. So, yeah, I do think, let's say c5, again, trying to bait me into playing e4. I probably would have gone here again. Let's say take. It's tough, though, because if ever d6, I think I play queen c6 at minimum. Looks like bishop c6 is also good. And if that queen moves, rook h1 is mate, right? Line like that. So, although I think in theory you want this to come up here, or maybe you could play around with some c6 idea. Logistically, it just probably never really works out. Okay, so take. Yeah, rook came up. I played f5 here. Certainly not the only move. There's stuff like bishop a4. Yeah, maybe bring your rook to the e file as well. I kind of like this f5 e4 idea, though. This seemed natural to me. Yep, bishop came back, attacked the rook. Queen e5. Does recommend bishop here as well. Yeah, because if rook d2, maybe now bishop g5. Again, though, I don't know that I even want to part with the dark square bishop, just in terms of winning this position in the best way. You can see it's winning with other moves, too. So queen e5, coordinating. Get the bishop involved. Yep, bishop d3. Maybe not the best move, bishop d3. Does say take here. This would be kind of similar to the other line earlier where I could have tried to win the rook on a1. Maybe white's best. White's best chance. Because d6 is coming. Their light square bishop is going to be nice. So still winning for black, but if they get d6 in, let's just say I play some pedestrian move and they get this in, could create some issues, although I guess I have this in this case. Okay, but white didn't sack the exchange. They went there, and that did run into queen takes d5. Looks like the easiest way to play. There's some other moves according to the engine too. But I was very happy to pick off that pawn. Since take, we're threatening a mate on h1. No time for white to take here. And that's pretty much it. f3, one of the only ways to cover, but that runs into this. Yeah, many ways to win at this point. Okay, yeah, fascinating game. In terms of percentages, my opponent had 86%. I got 95%. Some inaccuracies. I think these are pretty high-level inaccuracies early in the game. You know, knight d5 aside, I think knight d5 was the big calculation blip, like misjudgment of the position, probably more likely.
Hey, John.
But aside from that, oh, I got a notification. I guess my sub alerts are on. Thank you, Francis M. Sutton, for subscribing to my Twitch channel, even though I'm recording this only for YouTube. Thank you, Francis. Maybe he saw my game and just really liked how I played. But yeah, subtle game. I think this whole opening setup can be questioned for white, but hopefully you picked up some ideas from the black side, especially because I think I showed some nice options that black has in the Kan Taimanov formations. Even the Shevin variations can lead to situations like this. And I know I didn't pronounce that correctly. Sorry. But yeah, the two pawns on e6, d6, and then even the transformation when this pawn comes to e5. So fascinating battle against a strong player here, 2,500 plus. All right, thanks everyone for watching. I appreciate it. Thanks for sticking around for the analysis as well. Let me know if you guys have any comments or questions, and I'll see you guys again soon.